Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast with your hosts, Jason Mefford and Kathy Groover. Fire and Earth, giving you the keys to unlock your limitless potential.
Welcome to the Fire and Earth podcast. I'm your host, Kathy Groover.
And I'm Jason Mefford. And today we're going to be talking about fear. Ooh.
I don't even think I have the guts to go into this, Jason.
You don't? Why not?
It's scary.
It's scary?
It is scary.
Oh, geez. Well, fear is often scary, right? But what does fear stand for, Kathy?
False evidence appearing real.
False evidence appearing real. Okay. So.
And that's all we have to say. The episode's over. None of it's real.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to be a quick one. Well, thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. We'll talk to you next time, right? No, but I think it's, as we were talking about what we were going to discuss today, I don't know about you, but I see a lot of people living in fear, right? I mean, even myself, sometimes I'm a little fearful because maybe things don't go the way that I was expecting them to. Mm-hmm. And so then I get fearful that things aren't going to work out the way that they are. But, I guess since all of us have fear, what should we do about fear?
That is the $1 million question. I think for a lot of people, they don't even realize they're in fear. They have turned it into maybe a criticism of something or a just not even trying something. They don't even step into that space to see if they're afraid of something. They just sort of shut that out. I see that a lot. There's this maybe knee-jerk reaction of, oh, I can't do that. I could never do that. When I tell people I do flying trapeze, they either tell me I'm crazy, mm-hmm. or they say, oh, I could never do that. I'd probably die. I'm afraid of heights. And there's this barrage of excuses before they actually even cognitively think about what that would entail. Could they do that? So when I hear people right off the bat say, I could never do that, I know that's coming from a place of fear and from a place of unconsciousness because they didn't even give it a chance to think about it. And then, of course, I have that small group of people that are like, trapeze, oh, my God, when can I go with you?
Let's go. Take the net away from the bottom, right? Because
No, taking the net away. No, okay. We will always have a net. Always. That's how we get down. So if you see trapeze without a net, you're going to want to pass on that. Yeah, so I think so much of it is this knee-jerk reaction before they even try to cognitively understand what that task might be.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, it ends up holding people back, right? Because again, it's false evidence appearing real, right? And so it ends up holding us back from actually kind of living or having that full potential that we could have, right? And so you see that from kind of a trapeze standpoint, or, one of the experiences that I had too was going scuba diving. Okay. And, I've done it once. I'll probably try to do it again, but it scares the crap out of me. Okay. But I was with, one of my friends is an expert diver. He's one of those crazy guys. There's very few people in the world that are licensed to, do a lone scuba because he's like a master guy. And so I was over in Saudi Arabia where he lives near the Red Sea, and it has some of the best scuba in the world. Yes. And so I was there over a weekend. He's like, come on, Jason, you got to come. And I'm like, dude, I'm scared. Right. Because I actually have this fear of drowning. Right. And I know it's like everybody kind of has their worst way that they wouldn't want to die. And for me, it's drowning because I've had a couple of experiences in my life where I almost drowned. Right. So it's probably not completely unfounded, but, again, here I was thinking, no, I can't go. And kind of that knee-jerk reaction like you talked about. But the reality is my friend is one of the best scuba divers in the world. He's trained hundreds of people how to do this. People scuba dive every single day and they're fine, right? And so really that fear that I had was really unfounded. It wasn't true, but it was kind of holding me back because I'm not that strong of a swimmer. And so I finally got the courage up to go in. And the place where we were going in, it had a lot of rocks and it was really slippery. And so kind of what it's like trying to walk on fins on slippery rocks. And it happened to be kind of right where the surf was like, coming in. And so it kept knocking me all around as I'm trying to hobble my way down there. And so I just kind of freaked out the first time. And, he looked at me and he's like, "You're not looking very good." And I'm like, "No, I got to get out. I got to get out." Right. So I got out, I sat down, I tried to compose myself. And again, it was like, "Come on, Jason, this is stupid. You're in one of the most beautiful places to scuba dive in the world. You've got this friend who wants to take you and wants to show you this. You can do this." And so I composed myself and he took me to the other side where there weren't the rocks. And we went in kind of a little safer way. I was still scared, but my goodness, how amazing it was. And, I was only down for a few minutes, but to kind of see everything, I've got pictures to prove that I was actually there,
That's so cool.
And when I got out, I mean, I just had this sense of elation that I had done it. I mean, I felt like I just climbed Everest at that point and just had this great feeling, right? And so, that's why I kind of see that when it goes back to fear, because, like you said, it's false, to begin with. But had I stopped at the beginning and said, "No, I can't do that," had that knee-jerk reaction, or if I had given up after I tried to go in the first time, I wouldn't have been able to experience that joy of actually having done it. And so, I think that's where this really kind of lines into what we're talking about, of trying to help people unlock their potential. There's a lot of potential inside of us. We can't have fear holding us back from unlocking that potential. So,
yes. That's awesome. I love scuba diving. I just got done diving the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. Dream come true, one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, we can drown. Of course we can.
So it's a reality.
Yeah, in that sense, that is a founded fear, for someone who's not a strong swimmer, or for someone who maybe has a breathing problem. There are times that we should go in with the highest amount of safety in mind. We want to make sure we do it smartly. We want to make sure we do it safely. If you said, "I've never been scuba diving and I'm terrified and I rented a tank and I went to the beach myself," I'd be like, no, don't do it, because that's just stupid. But like you said, you're with a world-class diver who is there, who has your back. So when we have those wins, when you got out of the water and you said, "Oh my God, I did that thing," that ups our bravery a little bit. And to me, from what I've noticed, is every time we have those little wins, we keep having more and more of those wins. And it's funny because people think I'm fearless because I pretty much say yes to everything. Do you want to go scuba diving? Yes. Do you want to jump off that 40-foot cliff? Sure. Do you want to skydive? Absolutely. There's not much I say no to, because one, I love that feeling of accomplishment. And two, why would I not try that? To me, that's whether it's a food. I had warthog carpaccio when I was in South Africa. It's like I want to experience those things. And I think that attitude, that go for it that we talked about, in one of our previous episodes, that's one of the things that has allowed me to accomplish the things that I have. But it's interesting because the way our brain is wired to protect us. So we actually respond quicker to negative valenced words than we do positive ones. So if you're about to cross the street and I see there's danger and I scream no, your brain responds to that quicker than if I said yes. It's fascinating. So to a certain extent, we are wired for fear. We are wired to have that protective mechanism. So in that regard, that's a good thing. It keeps us safe. It keeps us surviving to this point. But it can also really hold us back when we fall into that pattern of fear that's unfounded, that's just an excuse, and sometimes not a conscious excuse, certainly, but an excuse to not try something new, to not try to write that book, to not get on that stage, to not talk to the cute girl in the bar, to not, what do you have to lose? And to me, if there is no failure, there's only feedback. So if you try something and it doesn't work, okay, well, you've now learned a new tact. You've now learned something else. And was it Einstein that said, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just found 10,000 new ways
Yeah.
of doing something or something like that. I'm just
Yeah,
butchered that quote.
it was Thomas Edison. Yeah, because I
Yeah,
think it took him like 10,000 attempts to invent the light bulb, and he said, I didn't fail. I found 10,000 ways it didn't work."
right. Yeah, and
You
that
know,
led him to the one that did. And, thank God we have people that have the patience to try something 10,000 times, because how many times have we done something once and went, it didn't work?
yep.
Well, it
Well,
rarely does the first time.
Well, yeah. I mean, usually the first time it doesn't work because again, we have to practice, we have to learn how to do it, to do that. And I love that quote that you said there. That's one of my favorite ones. Is that there is no failure, there's only feedback. Because as long as you keep kind of getting up and moving forward, then you're making the progress.
Mhm.
And again, it's like, I would have been very silly to think, oh, I'm just going to go hop in the Red Sea and I'm just going to tootle around like all the people on the National Geographic Channel, right? Because I'm an expert. I've been doing this forever. Of course, I was clumsy and I didn't quite know what to do and I was a little scared, until you get used to it,
Yeah,
until you do it, until you try it. But I think it's interesting because I help a lot of people try to manage risk, and
right.
like you said, with if I would have just gone in there by myself, and rented a tank and didn't know what I was doing, that's probably a really bad idea, right? But one of the kind of the easy ways that I've heard to try to explain to people is, and this was a guy he does he's a mountain climber and like extreme skier.
Oof.
And so when he was talking about, he used this example of how he teaches risk to his daughter, that's, I think she's, 5, 7, something like that. And he's like, so if we do this, is this a, bumps and scrapes kind of thing that could happen? Is this, I'm going to, break my leg or I need to go to the hospital? Or is this a death kind of a thing? And so as he's out with her, in the wild,
Right.
it's like, oh, Dad, this is probably just a bumps and scrapes kind of thing. Let's go do it. Because there's a lot of times again where we have this fear, like you said, of trapeze, right?
Mhm.
And one day you're going to get me up on there too, because that's a little scary as well. But in my mind, I know the worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to slip and I'm going to drop and I'm going to free fall for a second or two, and then I'm going to hit a net, right? Because there is a safety net below.
Yep.
And so that's the worst thing that can happen is I might, I get that free fall feeling for a few minutes or for a couple seconds, not for a few minutes, but a couple seconds, which is actually probably exhilarating, but I'm going to be okay.
Right.
You know,
And actually, you don't even get that because you're roped in. They
okay.
lower you gently into the net.
Okay. So say
So it's even extra safe.
yeah, or like you said, those things that are holding us back, like not talking to the attractive girl in the bar, not going on the trapeze, not going out and exercising, or just these different things, because we think, oh, we can't do that. But
Right.
what really is the worst that's going to happen? You might get told no. It might
Mhm.
not work out the way you were expecting, but it's really probably not that big a deal. It's not a go to the hospital or die kind of a
Right.
thing. It's the impact if it doesn't work is very little,
Right.
right?
Well, and I was going to say, and as you're saying that, it's not a die thing, but there have been times where I've had clients in my office and I've gone through the exercise of, okay, well, what if that does happen? Well, I really want to write my book. Okay, well, I don't think I can. Okay, well, what if you can't? What's going to happen? And you follow that trail, and inevitably, it ends up to death. This is what our mind does to ourselves. People are going to laugh at me. Okay, so what if that does happen? Well, I'm going to be humiliated. Okay, well, what if that does happen? Well, I'm not going to survive it. You will. you know.
Yeah,
So, especially with something, taking trapeze and scuba diving, which, let's face it, does have a certain amount of physical risk. Why can't you write your book? Or why can't you ask for that promotion? Or why can't you? It's that fear that is totally unfounded, because you're right, there is no physical risk of going to your boss and saying, look, I've been busting my butt for this company for 15 years. I need a raise.
mm-hmm.
You're not going to die. Is that situation fight or flight worthy? Is that situation worth mounting this whole stress response for? Is it that scary to say, I would like a raise? Rejection is huge fear for a lot of people. We really feel like we're going to die if we've been rejected. There has to be a way, whether you practice it with a friend. I am all about rehearsing things. It's the actor in me. Sit down with a friend and say, okay, I'm going to say to you what I want to say to my boss. You get to play him or her. I want you to give me every possible scenario. Starting with, oh, well, of course, Bob, you've been a really valued employee. Of course I'm going to give you a raise. Take 2 extra weeks of vacation, too. Win.
Woo.
In fact, just go home right now. There's a girl in the bar that wants to talk to
That wants to talk to you.
Now, see, there's physical risk there because she could slug you, but that's a whole other thing. Run that through every single scenario and feel those feelings so that you aren't taken aback. And this is the thing with these physical activities, like you said, we want to be prepared for them. We want to be trained for them. And I'll tell you, and I'll add to your scuba story. When I was in Australia, I had paired up with a buddy. I picked her specifically. We were at about the same level. She was a little more advanced than me. We had the same speed. So it was a perfect match. She was from Germany. And we're swimming along. And when you put the reg in your mouth, the hose goes off to the right, and it's sort of stiff. So I noticed every time I turned my head, it got a little looser because the hose was stiff. So at one point, I wanted to make sure I was still with my buddy, and I turned to look to see if she's still there, which loosened the cord a little bit, and just as she took a stroke, she ripped the regulator right out of my mouth. And for a second, I thought, I have no way to breathe.
Yep.
Huh. Now, I've been trained for this. I know what to do. So I got her attention, and I went, and she looked, and behind her goggles, you could see her eyes go. And I did the sweep as I was trained, and I popped the reg back in my mouth. I blew air to make sure and I was fine. Because I was trained to know I have 2 air sources. She has 2 air sources. And there was literally 0 panic because I knew I was trained to handle that. Now, had I not been trained to handle that, that would have been terrifying. This is where practice, training, knowledge, education comes in. Fast forward to the next day. I'm swimming along. This unknown thing lunges at me out of this murky water, scares the living crap out of me. It was my own hair. Because this piece, folks, this piece never gets longer than that. So as I'm swimming, I stop and my hair goes bloop, 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 bloop. I'm like, ah! I'm screaming underwater. Fight or flight. I should have reacted that way to something jumping at me. Little did I know it was my own hair. Whole nother problem. We'll address that in another episode. But that's the point of this fear thing. That was absolutely false evidence appearing real. The time that I actually did have a problem, an issue, a setback, I was trained for it. So if you're going into a situation that scares you, practice. Get used to those different scenarios of what could go on. This is why we have courses and classes in trapeze and scuba and base jumping and paragliding. I mean, this is why you train ahead of time. So why can't you do that for business things, for relationship things? It's about practicing and getting comfortable with those various scenarios. So there's my hair scuba story.
I love that hair scuba story.
Oh, it was terrifying.
But I think what you bring up there is interesting too, because again, like you said, we're hardwired for the fight or flight kind of a thing. I mean, there's a part of our brain that kicks in anytime those things happen. But like you said, that the more we practice and the more we get used to either taking little risks, that get us comfortable with realizing that, hey, you know what, I can do this little bit. Because the brain doesn't know the difference between a little success and a big success. And so the more little successes you have and the more you practice, like you said, even if it's sitting down with your friend and saying, okay, you be my boss and let's kind of, role play this. What would I say if you said this, sort of a thing? How would I feel if this happened? And this gets back to some of the visualization stuff, that we can do as well to try to help us get past some of this stuff. because like you said, and it's interesting because as you're trained, because I've done stuff with people in crisis situations as well, and that's why, every time you get on the airplane, you go through the safety demonstration. Now, most of us don't listen to us, but we still hear it, and we've still heard it hundreds or thousands of times. And so that's why when something happens, that little part of our brain kicks in, and subconsciously we actually do what we need to do. So just like you said, when your mouthpiece came out, your body knew what to do because you'd been conditioned and trained to do that. And so there was really no need to have fear at that point because your body just knew what to do. And the other interesting thing on it is that, that little part of our brain that wants to do the fight or flight, it beeps really hard for about 6 or 7 seconds, and then your cognitive brain takes back over.
Mm-hmm.
So, the other thing too is that if if you have this fear and it's like, all of a sudden, that's where breathing for 5 or 6 seconds, and then let your cognitive brain actually kick back in, and then you're going to say, well, gee, you know what? That probably really isn't as big of a deal as what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets you past that, versus if you feed that the first 6 or 7 seconds, then all of a sudden you start obsessing about that, right? And that's where I've seen so many people, I do it sometimes myself, and I kind of smack myself around when I do, but we'll experience kind of that fear emotion, and then we'll start feeding it. And the problem is, right, where your attention goes is what you see and what happens. And so the more we focus on the fear side of it, then we totally lose out on that positive, right?
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing, whether you're doing trapeze or scuba, or you're talking to, somebody at the bar. If we focus on the potential negative that might come out of it, then it just like locks us in place and we can't move. But if you think about, hey, if I talk to that girl in the bar and she says yes, cha-ching, right? I'm going to feel so great, as opposed to focusing on, oh, she's probably going to say no to me anyway.
Right.
And you kind of let off a different energy at that point too.
That's a really good point, because how we go into situations depends on how we are thinking about that situation. So if we decide to, yes, I'm going to sit down with the boss and I'm going to ask for a raise, and we've built it up in our head that he's probably going to say no because he didn't like the way I did those TPC reports, and the last time I had my review it wasn't great, and he probably doesn't like me, and my hair is bad because it flies in my face when I do scuba, and you build up this horribly negative thing. Well, my God, how are you going to present in his office? Hey, I'd really kind of like a raise, and you're probably going to say no. But it's like, I've seen people do that. Whereas if you go in with, hey, this is why I deserve it, this is what I've done, you go in with confidence and reasons why that thing should happen, and you've rehearsed in your mind again and again and again. You've seen that, you've visualized that, you've felt that. And with the visualization, so much of it is about that feeling too. When I was working on my TV show, I was pitching the show to the network, and I called my dad from the car, and I was actually starting to get so nervous. And I said, Dad, do you have any last minute tips? I'm pitching my TV show. And he goes, Kath, he goes, come on, you know who you are. You know what you offer. You're not going to change either of those two things to get a show. So just go be you. Tell them who you are. Tell them why this is a good idea, and have fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh my God, best advice ever. And so I started to think about that. In my drive down to Los Angeles, I started to think how good the show is going to be and how enthusiastic I am. And the next thing you know, I was visualizing myself getting an Emmy, and I'm doing my speech, and my dad is there, and I'm crying, and I'm like in the car feeling this, so excited. I missed my exit. I'm like, I should have gotten off, but I was very early, so it was okay. But I got so locked into that feeling of that accomplishment, of that excitement, that it almost didn't matter if my show got picked up, because I still had that feeling of success, that feeling of accomplishment. Yeah. And I went into that meeting going, here's what I am, here's what I do. They ended up taking the show, which was an awesome thing. But I had practiced that. I had rehearsed that feeling, and our brains and our consciousness goes towards things we know. It is based on those things that we've done in the past, those things we've felt in the past. So if we feel that success, if we feel that accomplishment, it gets locked into, oh, I've done that before.
Mm-hmm. No big
and
deal.
It will go towards that thing. So this is where I really like the practicing, the rehearsing. The self-talk is so vastly important. So yeah, people are going to think we sit around and do nothing but like trapeze and talk to girls in bars and scuba. We work. We actually
work. Yeah, that's right.
We actually work. But I'm just sorry. All our examples have been very fun. But no, it's true. So that would be, that would be one of my huge recommendations is not only go for it, but also practice it. If you know what you're doing, then you don't have to have that fear.
Yeah, and for some people that are afraid to kind of get started, I mean, like we said, just start with something small, right? I mean, again, if you're fearful about certain things happening, well, just go for it. I mean, one of the things that I've heard is face your fears and go for it. Kind of a thing where if you fear something, that's probably the thing that you should try to tackle. And it doesn't mean try to tackle the whole thing maybe all at once, but just take a little step, in that way. And it's, because it's those little steps each day that actually help us get to where we need to go. Right.
Yes.
And I mean, our friend Jim Cathcart, he talks about putting your running shoes on. Right. And so for me, especially because I'd gotten to be about 60 pounds at least 60 pounds overweight from where I should have been. And kind of took, I finally had one of those things where it's like, you know what, I got to change, and thought about Jim's advice to just put my running shoes on every day and just do something little. And at first, all I could do was walk, but I would make sure that I would go outside each day and walk at least for a few minutes. And again, the more you do that, that's more of that practicing. That's more of that, kind of getting the fear or other stuff out of there. And the more you practice it, the more you visualize it, the more you actually can face your fears, and they just kind of go away. Right. So that's why now it's like, hey, Kathy, let's go base jump off the US Bank building. You'd be like, yeah, baby, let's go. Right.
I actually might pass on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. I just did a 40-foot cliff jump. I'm done.
You're done with that one.
Off tall things, but put me on. But you will get on that trapeze with me.
I will.
So yeah. So just as a wrap, I think it really is about, as we've talked about before, identifying those goals. What does scare you? Ask yourself those questions. Ask the 5 whys of, why am I afraid of this? What is the worst that can happen? If that happens, then what? If that happens, then what? If that happens, then what? What is your true fear? And then take those little steps. And with every yes that we get, it's easier to get to the next yes. So go for it, as we always say. And any final thoughts from you, Mr. Mefford?
I think that's probably a wrap. Just as a reminder again, I mean, unlock your potential and find those keys. Today we've talked about one of those keys that you can do by trying to get past your fear. Because we want you to live an amazing life and really unlock that potential that you have, so that you're out there doing the things that you love to do. You're loving the people that you love, and you're not living in fear. You're just having a great life and enjoying what you're doing. So
because you deserve it.
Because you deserve it.
Yeah. I'm Kathy Groover. I can be reached at kathygroover.com.
And I'm Jason Mefford. I can be reached at jasonmefford.com.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
All right. In unison. Stereo.
Bye, everyone.